my name is Jessie and I'll be presenting on Peter Pan syndrome. This is my audience. In order to understand Peter Pan syndrome, you have to understand the story of Peter Pan. The original story was written by James M. Barrie, and then Walt Disney took that story and translated it into his own children's movie. The way that movie starts off is Peter Pan is listening to the Darling children be told a bedtime story by their mother, while their dog, Nana, laid next to the bed and was listening. Well, Mrs. Darling and then Nana caught Peter Pan's shadow, but Peter Pan escaped. The next night, Peter Pan returned, and Wendy took his shadow and sewed it back to Peter Pan so he had his shadow back. Peter Pan, in return, took Wendy, Michael, John back to Neverland with him. The reason he took them back is because they didn't want to grow up. They were afraid to grow up like Peter Pan was, which is the whole reason why he left to begin with. Peter Pan syndrome is like the Peter Pan story. The men that suffer from this genuinely don't want to grow up. They don't want to take any sort of fault. They don't feel guilty for anything that they do, and they just don't want to get older by any means, have any sort of responsibility. They can't hold on to any sort of genuine relationship with peers, and they blame others for their faults. Peter Pan syndrome eventually leads to drugs and alcoholism simply because there's no other way to escape the reality that they have. Wendy in Peter Pan syndrome is genuinely the mate of the person who suffers from this syndrome. She is more of a mother-like figure rather than a partner, and she tends to take care of all their needs and take care of their friends if they're over and all that kind of stuff. The symptoms of Peter Pan syndrome are as listed. There's outbursts of emotion, anger to the point of wrath. They have difficulty relaxing, they're undependable, they always feel guilty, and they have manipulative tendencies. The causes genuinely are overprotective parenting, and then it is linked with narcissism. But the overprotective parenting was defined by psychologist Dan Killey in 1983. Basically, it just says that overprotective parents keep their children from growing into maturity, and they don't exhibit their own skills, and they don't face their own challenges. They have someone to always hold their hand through them. They get held back from actually learning from experiences that they go through. It's linked with narcissism, not in the sense of egotism, but more because they're absorbed with the imaginative comfort that they have in their minds, and they just become stuck in a childlike fantasy. They don't want to actually face the realities and difficulties of life. The cures would be family therapy, just talking to your parents, talking it out, figuring out what the problems are when you were younger, and learning to cope with the overprotective parenting and learning to cope with challenges on your end. The next one would be wilderness therapy. And what that is they basically put you out in the middle of the wilderness with other people with Peter Pan syndrome and make you fend for yourself, almost. They do it in 4 different cycles. And you go camping and you go hiking, and you share your experiences and prepare for the next tour. It just helps you become more aware of your consequences, and then you also realize that within every individual in a group is important, and it's a part of the system. There's also the Healed by Silence is another one, and basically you just have to keep from any sort of TV, computer games, any sort of internet, anything to keep you away from drugs and alcohol, any sort of temptation that you might have for the drugs and alcohol. And this concludes my presentation. Are there any questions? Okay, I'm sorry.